With her father's support, Anu finally decided to sue for divorce. Under the advice of his lawyer, the husband chose to negotiate privately. He eventually agreed to divorce, but said the custody of the children had to be theirs. But Anu's demands had always been for joint custody. On this point, neither side would give in. In order to win the divorce case, the husband completely denied Anu's contributions to the family lawsuit. At the same time, he bribed the maid in their home. He then convinced a friend who was there to try and twist the facts. When he went to see his former boss, the boss told him to think about it carefully. He asked, "Why was it you were arguing with me, but the slap didn't land on me? There were so many people trying to talk you down, so why did you slap the wife who loved you the most?" From another perspective, if that slap had been aimed at them, would you still think you did nothing wrong? Yes, growing up, naked older woman in my family was one of the best things that has ever happened to me because it truly taught me to not actually see that women growing is inherently sexual, and I think that a lot of stuff from that including women. Okay, hi guys, how are you? So welcome to the class. You just use the chat if you want to communicate. You can ask a question, make a comment, and for the rest of the class, you can also respond to the questions asked or the comments that are made. Okay, so I think we'll carry on so that we can try and push this content. And then let's see how far we can go for today. Okay, great. So in the past classes, we looked at three theories. We looked at systems theory, ecological theory, and psychodynamic theory. Okay, and just to recap, okay, I'm back and forth between these screens. Okay, remember in systems theory, we're looking at how different systems around your client influence them. Systems, for example, the school as a system, the school that let's say a child goes to as a system, the home that they live in as a system, okay, the community that they come from as a system, okay, and also how these systems influence each other at different levels, okay, remember that, and how these all influence the individual. Then we looked at ecological theory, okay, how that particular individual is influenced by their environment, okay. So in the environment, we have, again, the family, that's an environment, okay. We have the school as an environment, okay, the community, okay. Then we looked at psychodynamic theory about how the psyche of the person, particularly at childhood level, influences how they behave, and the psyche being influenced by their id, their ego, and their superego, being built up of that. The id, the natural desire to do various things, like to eat, to drink water, okay? And then their super ego, the trained aspect of them. So that would be like the influence from the religion, their upbringing, okay? Which eventually brings a balance of those two, which will shape the ego, which is the outcome of whether they'll be able to restrain themselves or not from the activity, okay? And how childhood influences impact current behavior, okay? So that's what we delved on in the previous classes. And now we are moving on to more theories. And for this particular session, we're going to look at behavior theory, or behavioral theory, sorry, behavioral theory, that is behaviorism. Um, okay, good. I'm seeing some good response. You're in and you're able to hear me. Okay, that's great. Okay, so just also post your questions in the chat and also your comments if you have any. All right, great. So we're carrying on now with the theories. Remember, I shared with you the concern previously that somebody asked about the social work students. You guys, you only know one theory. And I was in shock of hearing that. So I said, we must teach you this course this semester so that we don't have that. We don't get that response. I don't know if it was a joke. Maybe someone was cracking a joke. Okay. Let's take it as a joke. Okay. So all these are theories. And as you advance, you're still in first year, but as you advance into your second year where you will start your attachment, you'll be able to apply these theories and even now to use them to respond to problems, to suggest interventions for clients and other applications. So these theories help us understand how people behave and the problems in society. Okay, so we're talking about behavioral theory for now. It focuses on behavior that we can see with our eyes, okay? And how we learn from interacting with the environment, with the things around us. So, according to behavior theory, human behavior is learned. You learn something, that is how you know it, okay? And according to this theory, if you learn something like cooking or talking or or a trait like violence, okay, somebody who is violent, okay, then that can be changed because they have learned it. So it means it can be unlearned. All right. So this theory gives us hope for our clients that whatever behavior they have that is not desirable, they can unlearn it. Okay. This is very important in social work interventions, particularly when working with children. You know, sometimes children have behavioral problems, so we'd like them to unlearn some behavior. We have youth offenders, maybe they're into, they are stealing, okay? So we'd like them to unlearn that behavior. We have substance abuse client, we'd like them to stop abusing those drugs. We have behavioral disorders in people, okay? And we'd like them to unlearn those behaviors, okay? So let's look at the origin of behavioral theory. We have mainly three psychologists who are proponents of this theory, and they are Ivan Pavlov, John B. Watson, and B.F. Skinner. So we're going to go through their contribution step by step. And they contributed in the early 20th century, right? So this is an old theory. Remember, like you said in the previous classes, social work theory is influenced by theories from other related disciplines like psychology, in this case, sociology, and others, right? So these scholars argued that psychology should study behavior that we can observe, something that we can see, rather than, like, remember what Freud said? Freud was focusing on what is in somebody's internal thoughts, what we cannot see. Okay? So they felt that it was important that we focus on what we can actually see. Okay? That's important to note because so when you're carrying out your interventions, you focus on what you can see in this case. So, their research demonstrated that behavior can be learned through conditioning. Okay, and you're going to understand this as we move on through attaching certain conditions to that behavior. Okay, we'll break down each of these proponents' contributions step by step. So, the key assumption of behavioral theory is that behavior is learned. Okay, people learn behaviors through different ways. First, through experience. Okay, they have various experiences that promote that behavior. Okay, so they therefore learn that behavior, okay, through experience, through engaging, through practice with the behavior. Okay, like with speaking, children learn speaking through experiencing, speaking, practicing. Okay, behavior is also learned through observation, looking at others, particularly those who already understand or have been doing that behavior for a longer time. Again, children learn to speak by observing how adults are speaking. So you'll find that they might speak harshly, for example, because the adults around them speak that way. Behavior is also learned through interaction with the environment. Okay, the environment usually responds to our actions. So if one gets a positive reaction from the environment, they continue with that behavior. If they get a negative reaction from the environment, they avoid that behavior. Like if you are stung by bees because you went to play around the hive, you will not go back to near the beehive, likely. If you went near the beehive and nothing happened to you, you might keep walking around the beehive, okay? Being relaxed around the beehive, okay? Interaction with the environment, okay? So that's a key assumption. Another assumption of behavioral theory is the fact that you can learn the behavior means that behavior can be modified, okay? So it can be changed or unlearned. So social workers therefore help clients replace harmful behaviors with positive behaviors. Third assumption, environment influences behavior. So environmental factors such as the family. So people will behave like their family members. The school, people will behave according to the culture of the school in which they study. The peers, people will behave like their peers. Birds of a feather flock together. People will behave like the community in which they come from, where people throw rubbish around, the children will grow up throwing rubbish around. Where people throw rubbish in the dustbins and the community is clean, the children will grow up likewise. So all these, as part of the environment, shape individual behavior. Okay, let me just quickly check in. Okay. This is great. I'm seeing there's you have a post here. You're being reminded that tomorrow is the day that you're going to visit Shikusa Juvenile. Any donation is highly appreciated. That's great. Okay. Keep up that volunteering spirit. Wonderful. All right, let's carry on. Types of learning in behavioral theory. Okay. Now, in what ways do people learn? Okay. There are mainly two types of learning that help to explain behavioral change according to behavioral theory. Number one is classical conditioning. Okay. This was developed by Ivan Pavlov. Now, Pavlov, you've associated with this, not the first time you're probably hearing this, the dog and the bell. So, Initially, Pavlov was working in the lab as a scientist, and the man who would come to feed the dogs in the lab, there would be a man coming to feed the dogs in the lab. And Pavlov realized that the dogs would salivate when he was near them or around them, even though he didn't have food with him. So, despite there being lack of food, which would be the natural stimulant for the dogs to salivate, the dogs would salivate. So it means there was something about this gentleman. So that's what triggered Pavlov's mind. Okay, so Pavlov discovered that behavior can be learned through association, associating something with another thing. Salivation with this guy who comes to feed the dog. So he decided to test that. Okay, and that's where we go to the classical conditioning process. And therefore, let's look at a scenario where the dogs have not learned. Okay, the dogs have not learned. So food is brought. So now Pavlov is in the lab testing. Food is brought to the dogs. The dogs salivate because naturally the dogs salivate when they smell the food. So Pavlov was trying to associate this, okay, bringing a condition that would associate the salivation with something, okay. So Pavlov decided to associate the salivation with the ringing of a bell. So remember, the bell does not make the dogs salivate naturally, obviously. So the dogs are given food, they salivate. Dogs are given food, they salivate. Dogs are given food, they salivate. Then bell is introduced. Bell is associated. No wonder people are told, who are your associates? Who do you associate with? Who are your friends? Show me your friends, and I'll tell you who you are. Okay? So now we want to learn the new behavior. So Pavlov paired the bell and the food. The dog salivates. Then, so Pavlov brought in the bell, right? Bell and food, okay? Associated the bell and the food, associated bell and food, bell and food, bell and food. The dog salivates because the dog has learned to associate the bell with the food, which is the initial stimulant. So after learning, Pavlov now removed the food, the initial stimulant, and rang the bell alone. The dog salivated. So the dog learned to associate the bell with food. I've just put for you a YouTube video there. It's quite a simple one, so you can watch that later on the same. All right, so let's look at an example in human behavior. So you have a child who is repeatedly scolded in school. Okay, that's an uncomfortable experience for a child. And what may happen is that because that is an uncomfortable experience, this child will begin to fear going to school and avoid attending classes. So this negative experience becomes associated with the school environment. And so when you're doing your intervention, you'll want to find out what associations are encouraging the negative behavior that you want to change. So you'll be what observable associations, okay? And you'll get that from the client through the casework and the therapeutic sessions that you'll have with them. Okay. Secondly, we have operant conditioning. This was developed by B.F. Skinner. According to this theory, behavior is influenced by, according to Skinner, sorry, behavior is influenced by rewards and punishments. Again, I've just suggested a YouTube video there. Please, when you get time, just click on that and then watch it. It's very short and simple to understand. Good for your revision. So let's look at a simple cycle on how this would work. So you have a behavior, all right? Uh, and people like to talk of cause and consequence. So behavior would be, let's say, okay, the action. So what would be the action? Something, there'll be a consequence, something would happen. There has to be a consequence to a behavior. So after that behavior and the results of that behavior, yeah, that behavior will produce certain results, okay, acceptable or not acceptable. Based on that, the person will be or should be, okay, whether they did well or not, rewarded or punished. And this will determine whether the behavior increases or decreases, you know, or zizzes. So if behavior is rewarded, it increases. Okay. If somebody gives you something nice after doing something, after consequence, you will feel that this is good, I did well. And so you will repeat that, whether it is positive or negative. If behavior is punished, okay, even if it is positive, okay, you've done something so nice, you're really, really nice, but you're punished, you will decrease that behavior, even if it is good. Okay? So, what is it that instills or encourages behavior? We call them reinforcements, like a nail. When you nail a picture on the wall, you reinforce it so that it stays there. Okay? It doesn't fall off. If you use stick stuff, sellotape, some light material, it might fall. But if you take this nail that penetrates walls and you nail it there, it's likely to be there, let's say permanently. It's reinforced. Okay, so now we want to reinforce behavior. So there are two types of reinforcement. How do you reinforce the behavior so that it becomes permanent, like that picture on the wall? That nail has a name. I'll remember. Okay, so usually it looks silver like. Okay, so positive reinforcement. This involves adding a reward after desired behavior. And it's usually best to reward as soon as possible after the behavior after the action has taken place, after somebody has behaved, so that they can associate the reward to the behavior. Yeah? For example, a teacher praises a student for completing their homework. Okay? The result, the student becomes more motivated to complete assignments. They were praised. Okay, that's positive reinforcement. Then we have negative reinforcement. Okay, this one involves removing an unpleasant condition after desired behavior. So, for example, whatever condition somebody is in is difficult, it is uncomfortable, it is terrible. When that uncomfortable aspect is removed, the person will feel relieved. Okay? So, if they do something good, that terrible condition is removed. and it makes them feel better. That is negative reinforcement. All right. So, for example, a child is allowed to stop doing house chores after completing homework. They feel that the house chores are burdening them. They go to school very early. They have to wake up very early, spend time in school, come back home. Again, they don't get rest. Immediately they are home, they have to do homework, they have to do house chores, then they have to be told to go and sleep, you know. So if they could do away with just something like chores, they'll be relieved. They'll really appreciate that. Okay, so that's negative reinforcement. This encourages the child to finish homework quickly. Okay, so I'll put that in a diagram. You have the desired behavior. Okay, and either you can reward the person for an action, or you can remove something which is unpleasant to them, and in this way you strengthen the behavior. Okay, now another method is punishment. Okay, so reward or punishment. Punishment is also used to influence behavior. So punishment is used to reduce undesirable behavior. So let's look at the types of punishment. Okay, I'm just in the chart. How do behavioral theories contribute to psychology? Maybe expound that. Please expound on that question. Okay, because we have talked about the influence of psychology, okay, to these theories. So I think what you're saying is it can be vice versa. But maybe what I can say for now is that they are the theoretical base. Okay, these theories are the basis upon which psychology is practiced. Just like for us as social workers, okay, we are influenced by these behavioral theories. So you'd say, how do behavioral theories contribute to social work? So they influence our practice. They guide us, okay? They have been tested. And so we can be able to apply them in intervention to guide our intervention, not to totally inform our intervention, but rather to guide, okay? Let me know if I've answered you, okay? Or you can reframe that. Good. Thank you. Let's continue. Punishment, we're talking about punishment, is used to reduce undesirable behavior. So let's look at the types of punishment. Positive punishment, okay? That is adding an unpleasant consequence, something which is not nice. For example, a student receives detention for fighting. So they misbehaved, they fought. Fighting is not allowed in school. So they'll receive detention. So they won't want to be detained again. Okay. And so that will be used to make them not fight. Right. Then you have negative punishment, removing something desirable, removing something nice. For example, parents confiscate a child's phone due to poor behavior. And that is the issue of phones and managing phones with the young people, with children. Huh? So a lot of children have phones, even their own phones. And it's a nice thing for them, of course, under control. But let's say the child uses that to watch some cartoons and things like that. So to entertain themselves. And then they do something bad. So the parent uh, takes the phone away. Okay. This is negative punishment, right? So let's look at a modification model for behavior. So you have the stimulus, the situation, what it is that motivates or encourages the behavior, yeah? The stimulus. And from the stimulus, of course, it will make somebody behave a certain way. So the behavior comes in after somebody has behaved a certain way. There'll be consequence. Okay, either they'll behave positively or negatively. This will determine whether they are rewarded or punished, and from that they will learn. Okay, so this is widely used in behavior modification programs. So behavior modification, to modify behavior, involves systematically changing behavior through reinforcement strategies, like we talked about, both positive and negative reinforcement. And as social workers, we use behavior modification in schools. Yeah, because young people are learning. We want them to learn responsible behavior. In rehabilitation centers, if we are giving an example of drug rehabilitation, we want the clients who are there to unlearn their addiction. In juvenile justice programs, like now you're going to Shikusa tomorrow. So you'll find various programs, are usually various programs. It's great. You'll have an opportunity to practically see what they're doing. And so they'll be unlearning certain behavior. In addiction treatment, those who are addicted will be unlearning their addictive behavior. And there are various addictions. So, for example, um, okay, thank you for that comment. Class is so interesting. Okay, good. Thank you. For example, a rehabilitation program for youth involved in drug abuse may use modification techniques such as rewarding attendance in therapy sessions. We are very lucky, and you're very lucky that you're surrounded by all these institutions. Across the university, you have approved, okay, they do behavior modification. Some of you will do your attachment there. Shikusa is not far off. The men and women's prison is also just within town, and so many other institutions. So this is a great opportunity to learn in what I think we can call a university town. Okay, fine. So behavior modification techniques, rewarding attendance in therapy sessions. Um, when they come for therapy, they will gain because you're going to go through interventions with them. But a lot of times the client may feel, or sometimes the client may feel that they are being forced to, like when you're talking about youth here, they'd rather do something else. So to encourage them to come for the therapy sessions, you can reward them. Perhaps it's something that they like, or something that they need. Okay. So it will encourage them to come for the therapy sessions, which will then influence their behavior. Okay, I misspelled that. I think that was a typo when I was, or either it was okay, and either my cat or my toddler pressed something. Okay, so bear with me. So that meant I meant to write recognizing positive lifestyle changes. So when somebody improves, okay, in rehab, like somebody who is struggling with alcohol addiction and has been drinking on a daily basis and manages to skip one day, when we recognize that positive lifestyle change, okay, they are encouraged to modify their behavior. Encouraging participation in community service. You see, when people give back, when people assist others, when people are able to influence their environment, they gain a sense of satisfaction. There's a sense of satisfaction that comes from assisting others or improving our environmental space. And so this sense of satisfaction builds confidence in them, okay, which are some of the emotions that are needed to increase somebody's self-esteem and make them feel worthwhile. Because sometimes our clients degrade because of the levels of confidence that they have. So these rewards strengthen positive behavioral change. Okay. So allowing somebody, for example, to participate in community service, allowing somebody to engage in something that is fulfilling. Okay. So let's look at application. All right. Good. Application. How do we apply this? Okay. All this theoretical talk, but how will it help you in practice? First, in child welfare, remember, social workers are the legal custodians of children. So, our major clients are children. Okay, the welfare of children, the rights of children are among our main concerns. So, the application of behavioral theory will help children develop discipline. Okay, we can help them unlearn negative, indisciplined behavior. Social skills can help them learn how to relate with others and control their emotions, and many more. In substance abuse treatment, it can help us to reinforce sobriety, okay, by rewarding. Today, you manage not to drink. Here is a reward, okay? And then reinforces participation in therapy by encouraging them to attend. In juvenile rehabilitation, rewarding positive behavior in youth offenders. In schools, teachers and social workers, like school social workers, use reward systems. They use behavior charts. You're able to see to to what extent you're making progress. Yeah. Uh, Praise and encouragement to improve student behavior. It also works very well with children, with young people. Oh, you're such a good boy. Yeah. Um, Strengths of behavioral theory. Strengths of behavioral theory. So behavioral theory has many advantages. For example, it is easy to apply. The interventions are clear and practical, like we've talked about reward and punishment. Okay, positive and negative reinforcement. Compare that with psychodynamic theory. Yeah, remember where we are going into the childhood experiences, all that digging in depth in someone's psyche. Compare that with the understanding the emotions. Compare that with understanding people's egos. Okay, in psychodynamic theory. Okay, this is very clear. It's evidence-based. Many behavioral techniques are supported by research, okay, because it is cause and consequence. Okay, very easy to test and get reliable data from. If somebody else comes and does a similar test, they're likely to get similar results. It is effective in behavior change. It is widely used in therapy, in education and rehabilitation. Even for you, when you graduate, you're going to get a certificate, okay, and you're looking forward to that certificate. You're looking forward to get employment, okay. You're looking forward to contribute to society. So that it is encouraging you to take part in your studies, to be active in your studies, okay. But now, what did I say in the previous classes? None of these theories are perfect, just as with anything in life. Yeah. So they have limits. And that's why I encouraged you that Usually, you'll use one theory when you're having an intervention with a client, but you'll back it up with another theory to address the limits of the first theory. So, the theory you'll mostly apply is the one that will be most applicable for that situation. And then you'll back up with another theory where this other theory has limits. You'll do that in research, and you'll also do that in intervention. Okay, limitations. So it's strong, but it ignores internal emotions. I mean, we know human beings are more than just what we see on the outside about the behavior they portray externally. We are aware of how emotional people can be. For example, some people have extreme emotions of anger that they find a challenge to control. So that is something we would not be able to ignore, for example, in such a human being. Okay, so yeah, you therefore, in such a case, need to support that particular client using psychodynamic theory. Perhaps there were some childhood experiences that they went through, that influenced their levels of anger or their inability to control their anger. Okay. Another limitation is that it may oversimplify human behavior. It's just saying, okay, behavior is about how you can change behavior if you want, and it is about rewarding good behavior and punishing bad behavior, and you can make somebody be who they want you want sorry somebody behave the way you want based on reward and punishment. But we understand that the human behavior is more complex than that, and that's why people like to give the example of fingers, vidole wanasema hazitoshani, si ndio? Okay. The fingers in a hand, that they're not the same length, they're not the same size. Even children born in a similar household are different, meaning, yeah, despite having similar experiences, meaning that there are other factors that influence them, for example, emotions, okay, and other interactions. Now, I wanted to comment on that, on if you just come back here to the proponents, because there's one proponent who influenced this theory, but is usually avoided, and I'll tell you why. This is John B. Watson. Okay. So Watson was a very, very strict scientist, and he believed that he could shape anybody to become whatever he wanted. He could make, given time, he could make somebody behave the way him or other persons wanted the person to be. And so he did some experiments with a child, Albert, and this child in the lab, he worked with an assistant, a lady in the lab. And initially in the experiment, they exposed Albert to a rat, like in the labs, in the science labs, they have animals that they used to test. You did that in biology in high school, right? You test on the animal before you're able to proceed with other forms of tests. So rats are particularly used for these tests. So the child was comfortable with the rat. After all, children, even a snake, if they have not, if access to that snake has not been associated with the feeling of fear, okay, a child will just be comfortable even around a big python, okay. So that child was just comfortable with that rat, comfortable with the rat. And then Watson brought in the association of a teddy bear. And Watson used this teddy bear to bring in the condition of fear to this child, such that eventually the child feared the rat and anything that was looked furry, looked close to these two um, let's okay, creatures. Okay, these two items. Okay, so Watson instilled fear into this child. And so Watson discovered that he had the ability to turn a person into what he wanted. And so Watson wrote about this and produced books, and these were very popular around his time. And he promoted the idea that parents should not be warm to their children. People should stop giving their children kisses. They should stop being kind and nice to the children. They should be aloof from their children. Young children should be put in cribs and cry themselves to sleep, things like that. And this really sold. And a lot of children around that time were raised using that system. Watson himself had 4 children, 4 sons and a daughter. And he used those methods to bring up his children. And unfortunately, to cut the long story short, the first of Watson's children died at 50, became an alcoholic. One of them committed suicide. Another one, they all died under difficult terms because of this harshness that Watson used to bring them up. Eventually, Watson was very, very devastated, and he ended up burning all the books and his research material. And of course, there was a review of the use of his techniques. So you will find a lot of times Watson's research is avoided or not included in discussion, but I felt it was important to bring that up in detail so that you see that these theories, they're theories, okay? They're people's ideas. They may not always apply. And that's what I was saying earlier. Where one theory is weak, where it has limitations, you strengthen it with another theory. And like you can see in that particular example, uh, Watson failed even in the bringing up of his own children. So application may not always also work as expected or as guided by the theory. So whenever you see that the application of that theory is not going as expected, you adjust. Perhaps that was not the correct theory for that particular um, problem. All right. So be flexible. All right. And doesn't mean that Watson was wrong. He was testing. And it is also okay to test and not reach to the conclusion that you expected. You have given relevant new information, okay, which is very, very important to have in society. And just back to Watson, you'll find that that's why some people have, particularly in the Western world, they like to put kids in the cribs for a long time. Sorry, from an early age. The children sleep train. They sleep on their own, and those come from some of that contribution from that proponent. Okay, moving forward. What is the relevance of behavioral theory in our country or in our system? How do we apply? Where is it applicable? In dealing with the drug abuse among youth. Okay. So some of you will find yourselves as school social workers. Okay, you'll use this a lot. The school counselors, okay, that's part of school social work. So, school indiscipline, okay, in domestic violence, okay. Some of you will end up practicing family therapy, okay. In juvenile crime prevention and juvenile crime rehabilitation. Okay, so in rehabilitation centers, in schools, in correctional institutions, and such, not limited to that. Okay, so let's conclude. So, behavioral theory emphasizes that human behavior is learned through interaction with the environment, how the environment responds, okay, how the environment treats you. Does it reward you or does it punish you? Because behaviors are learned, they can also be changed through reinforcement, punishment, and conditioning. For social workers, behavioral theory provides practical tools for promoting positive behavior and reducing harmful actions. Okay, let me just check on the chart if there are any questions before. Okay, I see some. Is that detained? Oh, okay, okay. Oh, good. Okay, so there's a question here. I think he meant to be detained. Yeah, detention. Is detention a form of punishment? Actually, when I was giving that example, I wanted to just joke and say and talk about kiboko. I know that's the one you want to hear, but you know that government has done away with that. Though people still whip or give children canes in the schools, that's part of African culture punishment from parents to children, or okay, from the authorities. But over time that has been removed, but it is there. So to replace viboko, yeah, in the absence of the vibokos or the canes, yeah, this detention will be used in some schools. Children can be put in a room on their own. It's as if it's taking their freedom away. In homes, these same children can be told to stay in their rooms, so they're not coming down to the TV area or the living room to watch TV. They can be detained in a corner. There's in like in the creches or in the lower ECD, in the ECDs, so that it's not so extreme. Sometimes they call it what corner, something corner, and then the child is told to face the wall. So yeah, I know somebody's wondering, is that for you? You are like, that's something so small. I don't know. Can you correct me if I'm not getting you? So yeah, detention is a form of punishment. Now, I'll tell you where you will feel that detention is really a form of punishment is at adulthood or at adult stage. For an adult to be detained, um, a practical example would be to go to prison. So, just like in the school, the child is detained, they are kept in some room when other people are doing other things or when other kids are going home, they remain behind doing nothing, okay, not doing their schoolwork, they're just there. For an adult, it would be being in a cell or being locked up in prison. So imagine that. So do you still think detention is not a form of punishment? Okay, I see some good feedback on the visit to Shikusa. People are saying, count me in, count me in, hey, I'm in. That's very, very good. Please keep it up. Excellent. Yeah, that's how you make a great social worker, that voluntarism spirit. Okay, another question. How can a social worker use positive reinforcement to encourage desired behaviors in a client? Please also write your responses. Remember, no answer is wrong. All answers are correct. All we need to do is explain them. Uh, but I will say, I already gave you the example of rewarding attendance. Um, that can be like maybe giving points, like stars. If you're dealing with a young person, Schools usually have these, you gain 1 star or 2 stars depending on your performance. You have some opportunity to engage in an activity. You can give them interesting activity to do after the session. Like usually when you're carrying out your therapy, you'll give your clients some takeaway work so that they can continue to grow even outside the therapy session. You can give them something, for example, that exposes them to an environment that they like, or exposes them to something that they actually enjoy doing, which they will appreciate. Okay. You can practically tell them, praise them, and tell them how proud you are of them for the steps that they have made, the progress that they have made. You can share with them their progress chart. Okay. When you're doing group therapy with them, you can praise them in front of others in the group. Okay, so that they feel that the praise is not just at an individual level, which really builds their confidence. It makes them feel important. Okay, so yeah, there's so many ways. You can also just think of other ways and then just post that. Yes, I'm seeing that. Thank you, Dr. Thank you. Welcome, welcome. So we're just winding up. So these are now discussion questions. You should be able to answer this. What is behavioral theory? What is classical conditioning? You can give it a try on the chat, okay, and just respond. What is operant conditioning? How can behavioral theory help social workers change behavior? Okay, so you can attempt to answer those in the chat. But now this should be basic knowledge to you. Then we move on to this class activity. Now, remember what I always say, all this information is very, very good and nice, but if we cannot apply it, if we cannot use it in intervention, then it's not really building us. So what I always like to do is for us to create time and do some competency-based uh, practical work in class. So in the next class that we're going to meet, we're going to present these and practice these. So continue to work in your groups kindly. So a class activity, behavior change scenario. We have a scenario here. A 12-year-old student in Kakamega County frequently disrupts class by talking loudly and refusing to follow instructions. What behavior needs to change? What reinforcement strategies can be used? What punishment strategies might reduce behavior? So this is now the work. This is the competency-based exercise. This is what will help you acquire the skill. Okay. So each in your groups, develop a behavior modification plan. Right? Just that. The behavior modification plan according to this scenario. And then we'll present that, we'll be able to discuss and work on those plans. Okay. So let's move on to the next theory. Let me just check if you have any questions or comments on that theory for today. Okay, yeah, good. There's a question. How can behavioral theories apply in classroom management? Yeah, like we talked about teachers working with the learners and school social workers, okay? So in classroom management, I'm assuming here you're talking about learning, so learning in the classroom, so that's for teachers. And look at this one, like for example, this one, we just talked about the behavioral theories, reward and punishment. And we gave several examples, like detention. We don't want to go to the Kiboko angles, because we don't want to have conflict with not just the law, but uh, with upbringing methods which have been proved to be counterproductive, okay, or not. Okay, we don't want to get into that debate, but let's talk of detention. We've talked about that. Okay, um, uh, I gave the example of even stars. How about even marks? Yeah, the teacher would be like when the teacher reads out performance of students. Okay, sorry, performance of students in a particular test. So and so got this, so and so got this. Okay, of course, education systems are moving away from that. But that would bring the ones who are doing well would feel like they're being praised. They've passed, giving caps. There would be this, and they're still there. Even for sports, huh? Those who are engaged in sports, the team that has won gets the cap. So in the classroom, the one who is at the top gets the cap. Yeah. So you're managing by encouraging those who are performing to keep doing so. You're rewarding them. Caps meaning trophies. Yeah. And for those who are not doing as well, they are seeing that those who are doing well are receiving some reward, so they'd like to be like them. Those who are misbehaving, maybe they are making noise during class, they're asked to step out of class. That's a punishment. Okay. So yeah, and so many examples I know you have that you can add. I've seen that response to that question. I was responding to somebody saying theory is applied on environment, not in classrooms. Okay. You haven't complimented my yeah. Okay, I think he hadn't understood, but now he does. Or he was just making fun. Okay, let's move on to social learning theory. Okay, again, we're looking at social work theories. Okay, so, and we keep building up from the content that we had before. This social learning theory was developed by Albert Bandura. Okay, and according to this theory, behavior is not only learned through direct experience. Okay, this theory brings in a new way of learning behavior. So, according to Bandura and social learning theory, people also learn by just observing others. Okay, just look at what others are doing and learn. People also learn by imitating. Okay, that's what that person has done. So let me do the same. People also learn by watching the consequences experienced by others. That's how a lot of people don't want to go to prison. They've watched the consequences experienced by others. So, this is what social learning theory is embedded in. Hence, the words social learning, learning from others. Okay? Learning by watching others from the social aspect of one's self, observing others, imitating their behavior, watching the consequences of their experiences. All right. Let's look at the origin. Bandura was a Canadian American psychologist. So he argued that learning occurs through observation and imitation of others. He believed that individuals learn behaviors by watching role models. So role models are very key in this sense, in this theory. There are various kinds of role models, or there are various role models in society, in our social lives. Parents are the first role models, teachers, the next ones, friends, community leaders, celebrities. Okay, quality of celebrities will determine how the youth behave in society. Media personalities. So, what are the assumptions of social learning theory? The first, behavior is learned through observation. Okay, we are assuming that behavior is learned through looking at how others behave and imitating those behaviors. For example, a child will learn respectful communication by observing how The parents interact. The child is brought up in a very respectful home. People speak to each other respectfully. So you'll find the child speaks to others respectfully. Uh, the child has grown up in a home where people shout and they fight. And so to them, that is the normal. So this is how it should be done. Okay. Another assumption, people learn from. So why are these assumptions? Because it may not always be the case. Okay. People learn from role models. So we're assuming that individuals imitate behaviors of people they admire or respect. For example, young people may imitate the fashion, the speech, and behavior of celebrities. Why is it an assumption? Not all young people will do that, okay? But mainly, yeah, we find that that is the case. Third assumption, learning occurs even without direct reinforcement. You remember in behavioral theory, you had to reinforce in order to affect or influence behavior. But now in social learning, you don't have to do that. Learning can occur without the rewards. Learning can occur without the punishment. Learning will occur just by observing the behavior. Another assumption, cognitive processes influence behavior. So Bandura now brings in the issue of thinking, okay, and judgment, okay. Thinking and decision making play an important role in learning. So individuals decide whether or not to imitate a behavior. They have free will. Observational learning, okay. Now, observational learning refers to the process of learning behavior by watching others. And Bandura proposes 4 stages of observational learning. Number 1 is attention. If you want to learn something, according to Bandura, you have to give it your attention. You have to give that thing attention. The child has to be focused on that thing that they are observing to understand it. Then there's retention. That is keeping the memory of that behavior so that even if the object they were paying attention to is no longer there, they can be able to recall, and that brings in, let's come back here, and that brings in the thinking and decision making aspect, right? Okay, so they can be able to recall and repeat the behavior. And therefore, when they are able to recall, that brings the reproduction to reproduce that behavior. Okay. And therefore, the motivation that they have done it and they can actually do it. So let's just briefly go through this. So attention, the individual must first pay attention to the behavior. For example, a child is watching how a teacher solves a mathematical problem. They're, they're focusing on the board. They're listening to the teacher talking about how the problem should be broken down. 2, retention. So the child remembers how to do the calculation. Okay, so they remember how the teacher did the calculation. So perhaps it's an exam. So they remember the steps that were used to solve the mathematical problem, and they are able to then 3 reproduce. So they replicate the behavior. Okay, so for example, they just apply the same method to solve another problem. Then you come to motivation. So the person must have motivation to perform the behavior. For example, the student studies harder after seeing classmates rewarded for good performance. Okay, so they're motivated to perform that behavior. They're motivated to solve the problem. Okay, so let's look at how Bandura tested his theory. Okay, let me just check the chart. Okay, so I'm seeing this is good responses on the various questions that others have posed from others. Okay, so please keep this up. So there's a good discussion going on there. Excellent. All right, so this is now Bandura is now carrying out his experiment to test his social learning theory. And the famous experiment that he did is the Bobo doll experiment. So in the experiment, children watch an adult behave aggressively towards a toy, which they refer to as a Bobo doll. Okay, so beating the doll and abusing the doll and all that. So later on, the same children were given that doll, and many of them, okay, not all of them, many of them imitated the aggressive behavior that they had observed. So children observe aggressive adults, children remember the behavior, and then children imitate the aggression. So the key lesson here is children learn behaviors by observing others, even when they are not directly rewarded. So according to this theory, telling the child, giving the child instructions verbally on how to behave is not as important as being that instruction, being what you want that child to be. Okay, they observe you, they don't listen to you. Okay, role of models in social learning. So a model is a person whose behavior is observed and imitated. Okay, and the type of models include live models, people who are observed directly, people who the children interact with, for example, teachers, parents, community leaders. Okay, then we have symbolic leaders, those who are observed through media. So children don't actually know them, but they interact with them frequently through the media. They see them often. Okay, remember attention, something that has to grab your attention. So television characters, social media influencers, musicians, actors, sports persons. All right, that's why celebrities are encouraged to portray good behavior because they are models in society. One particular celebrity keeps reminding people in our society that she's not a role model. So, in other words, she's saying, don't do what I'm doing. Okay. Verbal models, people who provide instructions, for example, a coach explaining how to play football. Okay. A teacher explaining how to solve a mathematical problem. Okay. They speak and we learn from listening to them. Social learning theory and youth behavior. So, social learning theory helps explain many behaviors among young people. For example, crime and delinquency. Youth may imitate criminal behavior that is observed in their peers. So, you'll want to find out who they hang out with, that is observed in their family members. So, you'll want to find out the kind of home they live in. So, hence, social workers carry out a lot of home visits in their communities. What kind of community they're brought up in? Perhaps it is a violent community. Okay, so that would explain. Drug abuse. Many young people begin experimenting with drugs after observing peers. Okay, positive behavior is also relevant in this theory. So youth can also learn positive behavior such as leadership, volunteering, academic discipline by observing their role models who do the same. How do we apply this in social work? Now that's the gist of this content. In child protection, we teach children positive behavior by exposing them to positive role models. So sometimes it may mean a change in who they're exposed to. Okay. Let's say a change of caregiver. Youth programs, mentorship programs help youth learn from successful role models. And that's hence the importance of pairing youth with mentors who are well to do in society. Um, leaders of industry, for example, those who are successful in sports and things like that. Rehabilitation programs, former offenders may learn new behaviors through rehabilitation programs and counseling, okay, by observing those who were previously in their state. And that's why in such kind of work, sometimes we bring in somebody who has been rehabilitated. They share their story. So it is the clients see the possibility of rehabilitation, of success. Okay. In school social work, teachers and social workers promote positive behavior through demonstration and modeling. For example, in many Kenyan communities, youth mentorship programs encourage young people to learn from successful professionals. So there are programs out there, like one of the banks in our country is very involved in this kind of youth membership. Okay, and then I'll put an example there. Okay, so students learn through observing and interacting with their mentors. What are the strengths? So each of these theories will have their strengths and their limitations. So let's look at the strengths. Social learning theory, sorry, has several strengths. It explains social behavior. It explains how behaviors spread through society. That's why negative behavior in society has to be should be quickly controlled, because it can spread to the rest of society. It highlights the role of the environment. In this case, the social environment. It emphasizes the importance of social environments in shaping behavior. Okay, that's why you'll find some people in some communities or some cultures, they might witness and somebody new from outside that community or culture coming in with a new kind of behavior that they feel might be detrimental to them, and they quickly would want to remove that person from within that geographical space, so that they gel, they contain uh, the behavior that they would want to be in their communities. It is useful in social work interventions such as mentorship programs, role modeling, peer education. So these are interventions that you use, uh, like with mentorship programs. You can link to various successful people in society, link the youth. Okay. Um, in terms of role modeling, okay, you can practice, okay, playing a particular role in your sessions, okay, using, let's say, the chair method. Okay, let's assume that now, you don't take drugs anymore. How would you behave, okay? Um, Peer education, linking these affected persons to peers who have positive behavior. This works. These interventions work. And like we said, again, each theory has its limits. So let's look at the limits of social learning theory. It may underestimate biological factors. Some behaviors may be influenced by genetics or personality, like people are born like that. Some people are naturally aggressive. Okay. Um, it's difficult to control environmental influences. Yeah, there are so many things in the social environment that influence a person. Let's say, like a youthful person who is in campus. So the family is there, the campus life is there with all the various different kinds of youth. The community is there, the various institutions in that community are there. So to attribute behavior based on one or a few of these social influences may be challenging. Okay, to control, or even to control for, and say, okay, so the influence came from school, but and somebody else will say, but how sure are you it didn't come from the community? It could have come from the community or from home. Okay, relevance in social work practice. Social learning theory is relevant to address issues such as youth crime, school dropout, substance abuse, gang behavior, and therefore, as social workers, we must promote positive role models and supportive social environments. And you can do this from now. Uh, you are building your networks for the future now. This entire class, these are your networks. Okay, the class, the other students who are studying within the department, all the students doing different courses in the school, all the students doing different courses in the university, the people you're interacting with, the professionals within the university, the people you're interacting with in your neighborhood. and all over. Okay, when you go for attachment, all those are potential networks. So that's a rich source of future positive role models that you can link your clients to. Okay. So we must promote positive role models and supportive social environments. We must clean the social environment. Whenever we see that it's dirty, the social environment also has to be cleaned. Okay, to contain anomie. Okay, anti-norms. Okay, to contain negative behavior, to address, or else that negative behavior will spread across society, and it can reach a point whereby controlling it or managing it is challenging. Like, we hardly ever in our society used to hear of people shooting each other, even just access to guns in our society. Those things used to be in movies. Okay, they were so far-fetched, but now it's very common. Okay, so if it's not contained in time, it spreads very fast. All right, so let's conclude. So, social learning theory explains that human behavior is learned not only through direct experience, but also through observing others. By understanding how people learn through observation and imitation, social workers can design interventions that promote positive social behaviors and discourage harmful actions. Okay? All right, let me just check the chat before we go to the questions. Why don't you understand? People are really teasing each other. Okay, here is a question. How can we control our negative behavior? Oh, I think our own negative behavior as a social worker, Dr. Kariada, that's a really, really good one. Um, Now, Joe Harry's window. Unfortunately for this class, I didn't teach you in semester one, which I used to traditionally teach. But of course, you have interacted with Joe Harry's window. So there are two proponents, Joe and Harry. And Joe and Harry, in brief, came up with what is referred to commonly as Harry's window. Joe Harry's window. Okay, Joe and Harry. Um, a diagram that we use to explain self-introspection. Okay, that we use for self-introspection. In Joe Harry's window, if you can visually, or if you have pen and paper, just draw like a window. Like the traditional windows nowadays, people have very big, fancy windows, but then just the typical window, 4 panes. It has 4 spaces, 4 squares. If you can draw something like that, and that would be now a diagram explaining Joe Harry's window. Now, according to Joe Harry's window, there are aspects of yourself. So that would be the first square. There are aspects of yourself that you know about yourself. You know. Um, and everybody knows. It's clear. It's clear. People know, let's say, your height, just as an example. And you also know. Okay. But then now get emotionally. Yeah? Maybe emotionally. Maybe your temperance. You get annoyed quickly. And people also know that you get annoyed quickly. That's one aspect of one part of the window. The next one, the aspects of yourself. So we're using this for introspection, to be able to understand ourselves. There are aspects about yourself that only you know and others don't know. Okay, your personal secrets. Maybe perhaps some behavior that you have been involved in. Okay, that you are ashamed about. So you keep them to yourself, but other people are not aware of. Let me look for an extreme example. Maybe you have killed somebody. Okay, that's extreme, but other people don't know. Or somebody who's a domestic abuser. Okay, of course, if one is a domestic abuser, the spouse would know. Okay, but think of an example. You can also put some in the chat. All right, so things that you know other people don't know. Then there are aspects about yourself that you don't know, but other people know. So for you, you're not self aware about that trait. Maybe you think that you're a very interesting person, but people are really bored, or, or they get tired around you. This is whatever, something like that. Then there are aspects about yourself. Now we're on the fourth window. You don't know, and other people also don't know. So as you go through this Johari's window, you're really trying to uncover the aspects about yourself that you don't know and other people don't know, because they're important to know. It's good to understand yourself. And for these, you need to go for therapy, seek therapy so that you could, it is like excavation. Huh? You're going deep into the psyche. Okay, that's where now psychodynamic theories come in. Let's look at an example. Like there are things that we bury about ourselves from our childhood to be able to deal with some pains that we went through. Perhaps somebody used to be molested as a child, and the person who was molesting them maybe frequently, maybe he used to have a red uniform. And because the brain of that particular child is not, at that time, was not able to hold much memory, and also to deal with the pain of that experience, the child buries that information in their subconscious. So that information is in the subconscious, but that is part of that person. And so when they're an adult, they find that they have a fear of the color red, or people who are dressed in uniform that is red like, okay? But they don't understand why. And you see, for them to recall that memory is a challenge. And for that, such circumstances, you need therapies like psychoanalysis to uncover and recall. It's possible to have that recall. And it takes time to go through that process. But they'll now understand themselves. Okay? So the part that nobody knows, you don't know, people don't know. Then that part that people know, it's so obvious to people, but for you're so uh, it's not so obvious to you. Huh? Okay, it's good to know, and so on and so forth as you go through Johari's window, so that I don't take too much time on that. In other words, in order to understand, to assist ourselves, let me go back to that question. How can we control our negative behavior? Is first to understand ourselves and know who we are. So, what are our negative behaviors? And apply various interventions to control that behavior. First, we have to understand. Once we've understood ourselves and we know what we are dealing with, it should be objective enough to desire change, okay? Or to desire to deal with those issues, okay? Like the issue of abuse, to desire to go through the therapies to heal, okay? So that we no longer have to be afraid of everybody who's wearing a red uniform, so that we are free to live our lives, okay? So in brief, I can say that, but as we advance, we can do more and more, okay? So to control our negative behavior, because we can only assist others if we control ourselves. Okay, if we ourselves can address our issues. But of course, a social worker is just a human being like other people. So a social worker is not perfect. Okay. Also have that acceptance of yourself. So keep working on yourself. Keep working on yourself. Another thing I would encourage you is self-care. As you're going to be working with people, assisting them with various problems, you're going to be carrying a lot of their problems because you have to maintain ethical principles like confidentiality. For example, you can't go yapping around about the issues they've shared with you. And these issues, these emotional issues, where do you think they go? They're there. They're there with you. They become part of you. But you can't just be walking around with, but they're invisible, okay? Like invisible loads of potatoes. Potatoes will be physical, so you're wearing down and you're so tired. Now, by the same token, these ones are invisible emotional problems and mental problems of others. And so you have to find a way of offloading them. So as a social worker, as a professional social worker, you need to do self-care. You need to do other things outside your work, some sports, social activities, some singing. I'm not saying those particular activities, okay? Things which you yourself enjoy, okay? Things which help you recharge yourself, okay? They're different for different people, okay? Um, Consultation with a more experienced social worker in that area. Okay, go see them. Share with them the experiences that you've had in your practice. They'll be able to, in this case, they're allowed to advise you because you've gone for consultation. They'll be able to advise you. Supervision with, again, a more experienced social worker. Let somebody guide you in your practice. Have also a mentor in your practice, somebody who can always shape you. Okay, so there's so much that can be done, but for that, yeah, at least you should be able to do that. So take time to understand yourself, find out what triggers you, so that when you see that trigger coming and it's going to affect your work, okay, how you're assisting, let's say, some little girl, and that particular day you have been negatively triggered by something and you're emotionally down, then that day you can refer that client to somebody else because you know how it will affect you. Okay. All right. Mm, okay. Thank you for that. Thank you. Is modeling just teaching clients to imitate the powerful? Thank you for that. That's a good one. No, modeling is not just teaching clients to imitate the powerful. Somebody observes a model, they want to be like that model. So not necessarily the powerful, but those who have the attributes that we would want this clients. There's a lot of light here. We want this person to have. Okay. So the model is anybody who has the characteristics that we would want that client to have. Yeah. So it's connecting the client to the model, and the model doesn't have to be there physically. Like if it is something on social media or television, it's just changing the channel. So making children watch a different kind of program as opposed to what they've been watching, like wrestling. A lot of people who watch wrestling become violent. Okay. Because in them it's imprinted in their minds and they want to practice, and they'll practice around the nearest persons. The more and more they watch wrestling. So you can stop watching wrestling. They can stop watching wrestling and watch some swimming. Watch football. Okay. All right. Answer is yeah. Okay. I think this is back to the other response. We are responding to the other comment that was made. Okay, continue to do that, please. Find alternative to. Okay, yeah. You could also continue to give feedback. Please do that. Excuse me, doctor. Can this norm that goes if person is named after an individual who had a negative behavior in society influence? Yeah, this is a good one. Now, he's saying, in African society, people are named children are named after their ancestors or even those who are alive, people in the family, that can this shape somebody's negative behavior? Yeah, yes and no. Yes and no. Now, when it comes to yes, you see this psyche that we're talking about in psychodynamic theories, it's depth of mind. Like now, I was giving you the example of the person who was abused when they were young and they buried that memory in their subconscious. So there's the conscious and then there's the subconscious. It's like you're going deeper. Imagine going deeper into consciousness, buried information. By the same token, there's the consciousness, the super consciousness of the bloodline, the knowledge, the influence of those who have been before the person. Because when you talk about genetics, as much as they are physical, how do people inherit non physical traits? They get them from somewhere, isn't? Even though they are non physical, like temperament. Somebody people say, even though they were not named after that person, that hey, this one has the temper of their great grandfather so and so who used to come here and whip everybody. All right. Of course, in that case, also they'll be labeling the person and rubber stamping that trait, which is not correct. Now, if you go deeper and deeper into this consciousness, you're seeing the passing. Like when you pass a baton from person to person, the depth of the consciousness goes generationally. And so it is possible to behave like your ancestors, with even if you had never met them. Now, particularly so if you are named after a person, because there's that transfer, it is possible to have that transfer of consciousness or influence of consciousness. Now, some of this is deep psychospiritual theory, okay? So I wouldn't want us to go so much into them so that we don't cause confusion, but just briefly mentioning that, yes. And then know that we have the willpower to determine for ourselves. Just like we're saying, once you self introspect and you realize that you have some weaknesses, you work on them. You realize that your ancestors had weaknesses, perhaps um, people didn't like to work, people were lazy. So are you now going to say that you're also going to be lazy like the ancestors? And you have to feed and you want a better life, you will just make a difference. You'll be maybe the first person in your community to come to campus because for you, you want something different. Okay. So just like with the theories, they have the pros and the cons, the limitations. So that would take time to be able to pinpoint, but yeah, yes and no. Okay. So thank you for introducing that. That's deep psychology, spiritual psychology, traditional psychology. These are now the things that people try to run away from, and the African practices, but they're there and they're real. Huh? Let's see where we are. Oh, yes. And then you can also just put in your thoughts on the same. Every thought is correct, okay? It doesn't have to be what I'm saying. Okay. And then, like I said, on that particular aspect, it's sensitive. We are discussing, but you may not find it in a book somewhere. You might find it in some rare books. Okay. Okay. I see you responding to others' comments. Good, good, good. All right. Okay. There's a conversation there. Okay. These are just beliefs. Okay. That's part of that conversation. Okay. Good. Um, okay, good. You're still part of that conversation. Okay, good. All right. Okay, keep interacting. That's excellent. Um, so let's conclude. Questions. So this you should be able to answer these. What is social learning theory? Who developed social learning theory? What are the four stages of observational learning? How does social learning theory explain youth behavior? Okay. And then this is the activity we'll use to cement or practice the competency. We have a scenario here. A group of teenagers in Kakamega County begins engaging in vandalism after observing older youth in their neighborhood doing the same. How does social learning theory explain this behavior? So you'll do this in your groups. What role models influence the youth? How can social workers intervene to change this behavior? And then you'll present your answers when we meet. Okay. All right. Let's try and push a little bit. To Humanistic Theory and Client-Centered Approach by Carl Rogers. Okay, so we have already covered systems theory, ecological theory, psychodynamic theory, behavioral theory, and social learning theory. And most of these previous theory focused on problems, behavior, or environmental influences. Now, humanistic theory takes a different approach. It emphasizes human dignity, personal growth, self awareness, and individual potential. It's connected to what we've been discussing, okay? The ability to make decisions for yourselves and improve ourselves as human beings. So, humanistic theory suggests that every person has the ability to grow, improve, and achieve their full potential when supported in a positive environment. So, it puts the human person first. The origin is from the 1950s and 60s as a response to earlier psychological theories that focused heavily on unconscious conflicts, that is psychodynamic theory, and observable behavior, that is behaviorism. Two key scholars in humanistic theory are Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. Carl Rogers developed this client centered approach, which has become highly influential in counseling and in social work practice. Um, and then we have, okay, sorry, I was distracted a bit there by somebody. Okay. Then we have the core assumptions of humanistic theory. Okay. What are we assuming? That people are inherently good, that people want to be better, they want to be good. So humanistic theory assumes that people naturally desire growth, they desire fulfillment, they want positive relationships. But we know that is not always the case. This theory also assumes that people have free will, that individuals can make choices and shape their own lives. But that may not always be the case. Not everybody has a choice on everything. So social workers therefore help clients discover their own solutions rather than imposing decisions on them. Okay, as always, never make a decision for a client. Okay, empower them with information, as much relevant information as possible, then let them make their decision. Okay. Personal growth is possible. Another assumption: every person has the potential to improve their life circumstances. Humanistic theory refers to this as self actualization. Okay. And then the concept of self actualization. Self actualization refers to the process of achieving one's full potential. Okay. A few people reach self actualization, not everybody does. This concept was popularized by Abraham Maslow. Maslow argued that individuals strive to fulfill different levels of needs, which are the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I've put this diagram to demonstrate or to portray Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, according to Maslow, okay, you move from one level of needs to another as your needs are satisfied. Let's just look at that below here. So if we start from here, physiological needs, these are the most basic needs: food, water, shelter. These first have to be satisfied before you move to the next. Like the next will be safety needs, security, protection. So you can't talk about security if you don't even have food. You're very, very hungry, so hungry, so hungry. You are so thirsty. You don't even have a place to stay, and then you're talking about how uh, you need to be secured and you know you need to be protected from thefts. It really can't work because you won't even care about that if you don't have the basic need of food. Okay? Because what even will be stolen? All right? Even if there are things to be stolen, really you won't care because you'll be so hungry. All right? So once you have satisfied your physical needs, you have sufficient food for yourself, water, shelter, and other physiological needs, you then now start to be concerned about things like your safety needs, like your security and your protection. Your mind can fathom that because you've satisfied your most basic needs. And then you move upwards. Once you've satisfied your physiological needs well and you're safe, you have property, you've secured the property, you have food, you have housing, you have secured that the property. Then now you can talk of love and belonging. Okay. It's when now you can talk of, oh, I think I should have a family. Like now, as you're in campus, for most, this is, we're generalizing for most of you. If somebody told you right now to start a family, you'll be like, you'll come back to physiological and safety needs. Like, how am I going to even look after that family? But once you have secured the physiological needs, perhaps you have graduated, you have security in terms of job security, you have you're employed and you feel that you're earning well, then you'll feel like you want to share that, and you also want to be appreciated. So you'll then move on to love and belonging, where the desire for family, friendships, and love is, and you then move further on to esteem needs. Once you have all these, because now it is important to you how people relate with you in society, that you also respect others and they respect you. Confidence, you're being confident about who you are is important to you. And once you have acquired all these, you're comfortably acquired all these, then you want to focus on your personal growth. You want to be the best version of you. It matters to you that you can push yourself to be the best version of you. Okay. So individuals must first satisfy basic needs before focusing on personal growth. For example, a person struggling to obtain food and shelter may find it difficult to focus on education or personal development. Then let's look at Carl Rogers' client-centered approach. This is very emphasized in social work. Carl Rogers proposed that effective helping relationships should be client-centered rather than authority-centered. So the client comes first. So the client plays an active role in their own change process. The role of the social worker, therefore, is to listen carefully. Why are you listening carefully? So that you understand the client. The client is the most important. You support the client and you create a safe environment for growth. Okay, the core conditions of client-centered therapy are three. So empathy, unconditional positive regard, and genuineness. Empathy, let's look at that. Is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, not sympathy. When you sympathize, you the feelings of the client overwhelm you. Okay. When you sympathize, the feelings of the client, I was just checking the chat. The feelings of the client overwhelm you. So maybe the client is sharing with you about a particular problem they're having and they break down and they're crying, and you also are overwhelmed there and you also break down and they're crying. So when somebody walks into that room, which they're not supposed to, but they happen to walk into that room during the session, they don't even know who is the client and who is the social worker. It's like in the market when the madman steps on you and then the madman starts to run, and you are annoyed and you start to run after the madman in the market. And now people are wondering what's happening in the market. And a madman can run. There's a saying in my language, a madman runs even if nobody's chasing them. So maybe the madman doesn't even know he stepped on you and is running. And you're running after the madman. That's how sympathy is portrayed, okay? So you don't let your emotions, okay? Emotional control, remember that? Of feelings. So empathy is basically seeing the world from the client's perspective, understanding them. So understanding the emotional struggles, for example, of a teenage mother rather than judging her. Another important trait in client-centered approach is unconditional positive regard. This means accepting clients without judgment, regardless of their mistakes or circumstances, because you're going to have different kinds of clients, and some of them have major issues. Some have murdered people, some have raped people, and so on and so forth. Okay, some are violent. Okay, so social workers must demonstrate respect and acceptance towards clients. You are not respecting what they have done. You're not accepting what they have done. You're respecting the humanness. Okay? And that's the humanistic theories focus on that. You're respecting the fact that they are human beings, and like one of the values of social work is respect for um, dignity and worth of the person. That's what you're respecting. Okay? So, for example, a social worker supporting a recovering drug addict without condemning their past behavior. Then we have genuineness. Okay, so you're going to need to be genuine, which we'll also refer to as congruence, to be able to put the client first, to center the client. So you must be authentic and honest in the helping relationship. Clients are more likely to trust a social worker who is sincere and transparent. Okay, just be yourself. People can feel that. Huh? So if the client feels that you're relaxed, you're yourself, okay, they'll also feel that they can be themselves around you. How do we apply this in counseling and therapy? We provide emotional support to individuals who are experiencing depression, trauma, family conflict. They need to feel worthwhile. Yeah? In youth empowerment, encouraging young people to develop confidence, leadership skills, personal responsibility. In community development, humanistic principles support community empowerment and participation. Communities are encouraged to identify and solve their own problems, that they are valued so they can solve those problems. Okay, they don't need an outsider to do that for them. For example, a social worker assisting a teenage mother in Western Kenya may apply humanistic principles by listening to her experiences without judgment, encouraging her educational goals, helping her identify personal strengths. This approach empowers the client to rebuild confidence and pursue opportunities. Strengths of the theory: it promotes respect for clients, it emphasizes dignity and respect for all individuals, it encourages empowerment. Clients are encouraged to participate actively in solving their problems. Okay, they feel that sense of, I'm a person and I can contribute. It strengthens helping relationships. Empathy and acceptance helps build trust between social workers and clients, but people feel that you allow them to be themselves. Limitations: it may be too idealistic. Some critics argue that humanistic theory assumes people will always seek positive growth. Yeah, it's not always the case. Type A individuals mostly seek positive growth, but general people are mostly average, unless they are pushed generally. Less focus on structural problems. The theory focuses more on individual growth than on social inequalities. Somebody may want to thrive, but the structures around them, the schools that they have access to, the healthcare that they have access to may be an impediment. How do we put this in practice? Okay, so humanistic theory aligns strongly with social work values, including dignity and worth of the person, respect for diversity, empowerment of clients, promotion of self-determination. And these principles are central to ethical social work practice. You must always practice ethically. Ethics are number one before anything. Okay. They'll build you, they'll build your workplace, they'll build the profession. You will be representing all of us if you practice ethically. Lazima ukuwe na msimamo kwa maisha. You must be somebody who has a stand and believes, especially in the correct thing, right? Regardless of the circumstances. Okay, let's conclude. Humanistic theory emphasizes that individuals possess the potential for personal growth and self-improvement. So it does give us hope that even somebody who is at a certain level in life can, you know, uh, given the opportunity or having pushed themselves, be among the top performers in a particular society. And people have done it. Through empathy, acceptance, and genuine support, social workers help clients discover their strengths and develop the confidence to improve their lives. The client-centered approach therefore promotes empowerment, dignity, and self-determination, which are essential values in social work practice. So, you must be able to answer these questions. What is humanistic theory? Who developed the client-centered approach? What are the three core conditions of effective helping relationships? How can humanistic theory be applied in social work practice? And then you'll do this activity in your groups, which we will then discuss, we present and we discuss. So I put a case scenario. A university student in Kakamega is experiencing severe stress and academic pressure and is considering dropping out of school. How can a social worker apply empathy in this situation? How can unconditional positive regard help the student? What strategies can empower the student to overcome the problem? And then you present your responses. Okay. So please bear with me. I want us to wind up with this so that when we meet, we get into the practicum. Okay. We apply. Okay. And we use various interventions to apply. So allow me to attend to the questions that you have posted as soon as we are done so that we push the content. So week 8. Now remember, this is not an 8-week course. It's usually a 16-week semester, sometimes 14 weeks. But you understand the background that we have had in the country. And so this is a particularly short semester where we are having a crash program. But in all this content, I have covered all the material that you need at this stage. So do not be worried, okay? It's just that we have a short time to do a lot. So empowerment theory and the strengths perspective, we use this a lot, especially in community development. Okay, so we'll dive into it. So these focus on what people can do rather than what they cannot do. So we focus on the strengths of the client. Empowerment theory. What is empowerment? Empowerment refers to the process of helping individuals, families, and communities gain greater control over their lives and decisions. Empowerment theory encourages social workers to help people develop confidence. Sometimes confidence is all you need to make it. Access resources. Sometimes that is what some people just need to perform at their level best. We help people to participate in decision making, okay? So they feel that they have a stake. And we help people challenge social injustice. So the process of empowerment is first we need to be aware of the problems that exist. And then we need to access information like, the details of the problem, the sources of the problem, the numbers of people affected, and so on and so forth. And then to develop, help to build capacity in the community, if you're using the community as an example, as your client here, so that you can empower them with skills to now be able to address the problems, to participate in decisions, like in policy making, public participation, being invited to community bazaars to contribute on the matter, okay, and then control over life outcomes, so that they can actually, after all this empowerment, have control over their lives outcomes. So the principle that will help you in empowerment: participation. People should actively participate in solving their own problems. Okay, community members, for example, participating in planning a water project, when they participate, they feel that they have a stake, it is theirs. It will be more successful than if you just come from nowhere and just bring solutions. Okay. Self-determination. Individuals have the right to make decisions affecting their lives. It's their lives. It's their community. Allow them to determine for themselves. For example, a client choosing their own rehabilitation plan. They're the ones who know how they got there and what they actually know how to get out. Okay. So allow them. Access to resources. Empowerment involves helping people gain access to education, employment, healthcare, financial services. Sometimes people are not doing well just because they don't have access to the various structures in society that can propel them. Just like somebody having access to a scholarship, and it propels them. Okay. Social justice. Empowerment theory seeks to address inequalities such as poverty, discrimination, gender inequality, and others. Okay. Let's look at the levels of empowerment. Individual level, helping individuals gain confidence and skills. For example, teaching financial management skills to unemployed youth. Perhaps that is all they needed to unlock, okay, for their businesses. Then their businesses will thrive. Group level, encouraging collective action among groups. For example, women forming savings groups like chamas to improve economic security. Okay, that bringing them together empowers them. You can empower people at community level, mobilizing communities to address social problems. For example, community campaigns against gender-based violence. Just said, we've had a high level of gender-based violence in this community. We're coming together and addressing this issue once and for all in this community. All right. Application of empowerment theory in Kenya. Yes. How are you going to apply this? Where will you work? What will you do? You can work in women empowerment initiatives, even men empowerment initiatives. Okay. Because now I did attend a meeting somewhere where somebody was really putting focus on the boy child, and they said we have put so much focus on the girl child, and the boy child is being left behind, and they're affected mentally. Okay, so by the same token, if we just go back here, boy child initiatives, empowering the boy child, right? Can add that. Youth entrepreneurship programs. Okay, we empower, we can work with entrepreneurship programs to build the youth. A lot of youth are out of work. And so once they can able to fend for themselves, then they'll be empowered. Community health volunteer programs, microfinance groups, chamas, okay. For example, a women's chama in Kakamega may empower members by pooling financial resources, supporting business development, strengthening social support networks. Okay, let's look at the strengths perspective. Strength. Strengths perspective is closely related to empowerment theory. It focuses on identifying and building upon the strengths and resources of the individuals and communities. So focusing on the strong aspects of the person, not the weaknesses. So instead of asking what is wrong with the client, we should ask as social workers, what strengths does the client possess? And then we take advantage of that for their benefit. In strengths-based approach, first you identify the strengths. And that's why whenever you are with your client, you'll ask them, okay, so who is around you who can assist? You don't go far. You start with the family there, where they are coming from. Who can you be able to talk to when you leave the session? Who can support you? Oh, my auntie, okay, things like that. You don't move far. The strengths as near as possible, okay? So you identify the strengths. You recognize the resources that they have. Resources are there's an array of resources. Communities are rich in resources. People may not have sufficient financial resources, but they may have time, they may have labor, they may have experience and knowledge. Okay, building their confidence. Confidence is such a rich aspect of life. Like if you could just convince your client that they can actually try something or do something. That may be all they need to propel them to the next level. Okay. The strengths-based approach develops solutions, focuses on solutions as opposed to problems, and then achieving positive change. Principles of the strengths perspective: everyone has strengths. Everyone possesses abilities and talents. Okay. Trauma and challenges can be opportunities for growth. We went through a lot during COVID-19, but a lot came out of that also. We learned new technologies came up. For example, now we are able to meet like this using this platform because of COVID-19, not just because of COVID-19, but a lot because of COVID-19. Collaboration is essential. Okay, you must work together with your client. The client must work with you. There's strength in numbers. Okay, there's power in numbers, so it needs collaboration. The environment contains resources, like we said earlier. Okay, resources. The church that somebody attends is a resource base. Okay, the community is a resource base. Okay, how do we practice this in social work, in community development, particularly? Okay, we can use sports, music, leadership. We can build on local skills and knowledge. All right, and then I put an example there. You can go through that. We can help youth develop income generating projects based on their strengths. Okay. Here I have a table on differences between problem focused and strengths based approaches. So instead of focusing on problems, we focus on strengths. Okay. Advantages of the strengths perspective and empowerment: they promote self reliance, they encourage participation, they promote social justice. Limitations are structural barriers. Empowerment alone cannot eliminate systemic problems such as poverty and inequality. So you can empower people, but the society in which they are in, okay, the person may still have to go back to the violent home, the realities of life. Of course, now you continue to work with them and find other interventions for that. Resource constraints: communities may lack sufficient resources to implement some solutions. Okay. How is this relevant to modern social work? Empowerment and strengths perspective are widely used in modern social work practice because they promote human dignity. In modern social work, we push more for equality, social justice. And so issues of human dignity are paramount, that everybody should have access to the good opportunities, okay? Everybody should participate. So participation, community development, sustainable solutions. And these align closely with the values and ethics of the social work profession. So in brief, in terms of this course, we have looked at different theories that help to explain human behavior and guide social work practice. We looked at systems theory, how systems interact and how that affects the person. Ecological theory, how the person within the environment is affected by the environment around them. Psychodynamic theory, we looked at the unconscious influences of the person. Behavioral theory, we looked at how behavior is learned. Social learning theory, we've looked at how people learn through, especially young people or children learn through observation. Humanistic theory, we looked at personal growth, how people aspire to grow and develop. Empowerment theory, we looked at how people are empowered through participation. Strengths perspective, We've looked at how we focus on people's strengths, focus on their capabilities, and capitalize on those for their development. In conclusion, social work theories provide essential frameworks for understanding human behavior and social problems. Empowerment theory and strengths perspective remind social workers that individuals and communities possess valuable abilities and resources that can be mobilized to create positive change. By focusing on empowerment and strengths, social workers help clients build confidence, improve their circumstances, and achieve sustainable well being. You should be able to answer these questions. What is empowerment theory? What is strengths perspective? How can empowerment approaches improve community development? Why is it important for social workers to focus on strengths rather than weaknesses? So the final class activity, which you're going to meet to practically do, is a community empowerment exercise. In your groups, you'll design a community empowerment program addressing a social problem in our country, such as, but not limited to, youth unemployment, gender-based violence, drug abuse, school dropout. You can have your own. And you should identify community strengths and resources, strategies for empowering community members, and the expected outcomes of the program. And we'll present that and discuss in class. Okay. Let's go back to the chat and just see what you have, if there are any questions or if there are any comments that we can share. Okay, that one was already answered. The beliefs. Okay, somebody else contributing. You're talking about the Shikusa trip. Good. Okay, for those of you who joined late, somebody's asking how long the class has been running. Don't worry, you can just go back, use the link and listen in again. Okay, no problem. What are the conditions? Should a social worker be genuine to each other? Dr. Patricia, have I understood that? What are the conditions? I'm not sure if I understand you, but I don't know if you're asking how to express being genuine to the client, of which just being yourself professionally, not just being yourself, not just being yourself that you have, like when you're at home, okay? So, okay? Being yourself in a professional way. Unatumia kipimo, professional kipimo. Okay. I hope I got you, but you can still rephrase the question. Explain how humanistic theory promotes human dignity. Yeah, well, if you put the person first, you dignify them. Yeah. You're concerned about them first. You center them. Okay. As opposed to where they're coming from, where they're undignified and they're being abused and wanadharauliwa, wanatukanwa, wanapigwa, they're being ignored. But you're putting them on where they need to be. You're giving them what is their right. You're treating them like they're worthy. Okay. All right. Some jokes are there. How do social workers balance between recognizing client strengths and the need for professional intervention in high risk situations? Okay, these strengths, we're using them as an intervention. I tell you, nobody knows themselves than your client. That is why, whenever let's say in an organization, you initially have intake. And at intake, the client will register the presenting problem. But when you continue to have the sessions with them, you realize that what they presented as their problem is not their actual problem. And you think they didn't know that? They know that. Maybe they could be having a fear that it might be seen. They might try to hide or run away from themselves, but you will catch them. They have all those resources within them. And that is one of the pros of humanistic theory. It believes that human beings have the potential to achieve so highly. And people do. There's a clip of there's a clip of a tortoise, huh, running, running because of an emergency. Hmm? You see the potential when you realize that kimeumana, you can. And that's what we want to spark up in the client, okay? As we move on, you're still in first year. As we move on, you'll grow more and more in your skills, and they'll become second nature to you. Okay, you're doing very well. I want to encourage you. Thank you for your hard work and your contribution and how active you are. Please keep it up. Never let it go. Thank you for being active in volunteering. I hope there's nobody whose question I have not responded to. Some of the comments, of course, I've not read because I could see that there was a teasing. So, of course, you understand that. Yeah. So, I think we can end and talk. When we meet, we will now get into the competencies, acquisition of the competencies, so that you can be able to apply this. And we'll be able to now practice all these that we're talking about so that it's not just theory, how you're going to actually carry out the interventions using these theories. Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, I wish you a good evening. Thank you for joining in. For those who are not able to join in, just send them the link and ask them to come back and listen in. Okay. Cheers. Bye.